You've been navigating the world with a flawed map, haven't you? You've been told stories, sold narratives, and led to believe in a version of reality that crumbles under the slightest scrutiny, especially when it comes to the intricate dance between men and women, the very nature of desire, and the silent, often unacknowledged currents of power. What if I told you that much of what you've accepted as settled, as the bedrock of relational dynamics, is a carefully constructed illusion? What if the compass you've used to guide your interactions, your understanding of attraction, and your pursuit of connection has been deliberately miscalibrated? Prepare yourself, because the journey we are about to embark upon will dismantle those illusions piece by piece. We are not here to coddle comforting lies. We are here to unearth a truth so profound it might shake the very foundations of your perception. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, a mind that dared to venture into the darkest abysses of human nature, left us signposts stark and unsettling, pointing towards these hidden truths. He understood power, not as a crude instrument of domination, but as the fundamental driving force of all life, the will to power. And it is through this lens, his unyielding, unflinching gaze, that we will begin to dissect an aspect of human psychology often veiled in euphemisms and social niceties: women's innate and sophisticated obsession with power. This isn't a comfortable conversation. It's not meant to be. We are stepping into a territory that modern sensibilities have tried to pave over with platitudes. The problem, if you dare to call it such, isn't a new phenomenon. It's as old as humanity itself. It's a dynamic woven into the very fabric of our evolutionary and psychological makeup. The subtle, persistent, and often masterfully disguised quest for power, for influence, for control, that manifests in the female psyche. Why has this been so obscured? Why are you only now beginning to lift the corner of this veil? The truth you've been shielded from is this: the delicate flower, the damsel in distress, the image of gentle passivity often ascribed to the feminine, is one of the most effective masks ever conceived. Nietzsche saw through such societal constructs. He would argue that the will to power in women does not necessarily manifest as brute force, as it might stereotypically be portrayed in men. Instead, it is often a far more nuanced, strategically deployed force operating with a subtlety that can render it almost invisible to the untrained eye. Think about it. Have you ever felt a shift in dynamics, a subtle tilt in the balance of power within an interaction, without quite understanding how it happened? Have you witnessed an almost alchemical ability to influence outcomes, to shape narratives, to guide decisions often without a single overt command being issued? This is not accidental. This is the will to power in its refined, almost artistic feminine expression. But here is the truth that cuts deeper, a truth that many will reflexively deny. This drive is not merely a response to societal pressures, or a tool for survival in a man's world, as contemporary narratives might suggest. Nietzsche would likely point to something far more primal, far more intrinsic. He spoke of life itself as this unceasing urge to grow, to overcome, to dominate, not necessarily others, but to dominate and overcome one's own limitations, and to exert one's strength upon the environment. For women, this environment has, historically and evolutionarily, included the complex web of social and interpersonal relationships. What comes next is even more profound, for this isn't about demonizing or idolizing. It's about understanding the raw, unfiltered mechanics of human nature. The obsession with power, in this context, is not about malice. It is about an inherent drive to secure resources, not just material, but emotional, social, and psychological. It's about securing the optimal conditions for themselves, and by extension, for their potential or actual offspring. Power, in this sense, equates to security, influence, and the ability to navigate the world effectively. Consider Nietzsche's own words: "That which does not kill us makes us stronger." This isn't just a maxim for enduring hardship. It's a testament to the relentless drive to accumulate power through experience, through overcoming, through the subtle assertion of will. And where is this assertion more potent, yet more disguised, than in the intricate dance of attraction and relationship? Let us delve deeper into the shadows, into the mechanics of this veiled pursuit. If power is the goal, what then is its currency? For many women, particularly in the realm of attraction and long-term dynamics, the primary currency is not overt aggression, but influence and control over masculine energy. Nietzsche's concept of the master-slave morality can be, with careful interpretation, twisted to understand this. Not a literal enslavement, but a subtle psychological dynamic where one party's will subtly directs or frames the actions and emotional state of the other. You've been taught that attraction is a mystical force, a matter of inexplicable chemistry. But what if that chemistry is, in part, a finely tuned assessment of a man's power, his resources, his status, his resilience, his frame, and more importantly, her potential to influence or harness that power for her own ends and security? This isn't necessarily a conscious, cynical calculation in every instance. Often it's an instinct, honed over millennia, operating beneath the surface of awareness. An attraction to a man who is strong is often an attraction to a man whose strength can be tested, molded, or subtly directed. Here's the uncomfortable truth that society studiously ignores. A woman's power often amplifies in proportion to her ability to command or captivate masculine attention and investment. This is not a flaw. From a purely Nietzschean perspective of the will to power, it is a strategy. Why do you think the bad boy or the powerful man, even if morally ambiguous, so often holds a potent allure? It is because these archetypes represent condensed forms of power. The challenge for the feminine will to power then becomes to tame, to harness, or to be the primary beneficiary of that masculine power. The taming itself is an act of power. And what happens when this drive is met with a masculine presence that is unaware, that yields too easily, that doesn't understand the unspoken tests or the subtle bids for control? The interest wanes, not out of cruelty necessarily, but because the instinctual drive for power seeks engagement. It seeks something to push against, to refine itself against. A man who relinquishes his frame too readily, who doesn't understand the silent language of power dynamics being played out, becomes uninteresting to this primal aspect of the feminine will. He fails the unspoken test. The society around you will tell you this is an oversimplification, a cynical distortion. They will offer platitudes about equality and partnership, and while those are noble aspirations for conscious relationships, they often obscure the more ancient, instinctual undercurrents that Nietzsche dared to confront. The obsession isn't always with dominating the man himself, but with securing and orchestrating the flow of his power, his resources, his devotion. This is the art form, the hidden current that has shaped civilizations and personal destinies alike. What you are about to learn next will illuminate the strategies employed, the often unseen chessboard upon which these moves are made. Now we must confront a term that is often whispered in hushed tones, laden with judgment, yet is, through this Nietzschean lens, a stark manifestation of the will to power, hypergamy. Stripped bare of its modern connotations and moralistic overlays, hypergamy is not merely a passive preference for marrying up. It is an active, strategic element of the feminine will to power, a drive to secure and align with a greater quantum of power. Nietzsche would have understood this not as a moral failing, but as an expression of life's inherent tendency to strive, to enhance itself, to seek ascendancy. Consider the relentless, almost biological imperative. Is it truly about love, as the poets sing? Or is that beautiful veneer often concealing a more fundamental calculus of power? The drive to secure the best possible provision, protection, and genetic legacy is a powerful one. It's not gold digging, in the crass, simplistic sense you might hear thrown around. It's a far more sophisticated, often subconscious audit of a man's overall power signature, his ambition, his resilience, his social capital, his ability to impose his will upon the world and shape reality to his advantage. These are all facets of his will to power, and therefore resources to be potentially aligned with. But here lies the more brutal truth, the one that causes discomfort in polite society. This assessment is perpetual. The will to power does not rest once a certain level is achieved. It is a constant striving. What happens then when a man's power diminishes, or when a source of greater power becomes available? The hypergamic instinct, that expression of the feminine will to power, may begin to subtly or overtly recalibrate. Loyalty, in this framework, can become conditional on the sustained or growing exhibition of the power that initially attracted. This isn't to say genuine affection doesn't exist, but that it often exists alongside and is subtly influenced by these deeper, more primal power dynamics. Think of the subtle shifts in social dynamics, the way women often unconsciously or consciously gravitate towards the perceived locus of power in any given group. Observe the admiration, the attention, the validation that flows towards the man who demonstrates superior competence, status, or control, his frame. This is the market of power in action, and the feminine will to power is an astute, discerning participant. To deny this is to deny a fundamental aspect of human nature, an aspect Nietzsche relentlessly sought to expose. The crisis of masculinity you hear so much about. Perhaps it is, in part, a consequence of men failing to understand or effectively cultivate their own will to power in a way that commands respect and alignment from the feminine. When men become too passive, too accommodating without strength, too quick to abdicate their own frame, they cease to be compelling figures in this ancient dance of power. They fail to provide the necessary resistance, the necessary mountain, for the feminine will to power to test itself against, or the peak upon which it wishes to plant its flag. What we are about to explore is the societal game that has been constructed around these truths, and how you have been conditioned to misread the board. You have been systematically programmed to misinterpret these ancient dynamics. Society, in its bid for harmony, or perhaps more cynically for control, has spun a narrative that often inverts cause and effect, that shames masculine strength while subtly rewarding feminine power plays that operate beneath the veneer of victimhood or righteous demand. Nietzsche warned of slave morality, a system that seeks to overturn the natural valuations of the strong, labeling their virtues as vices. Can you not see echoes of this in the modern discourse surrounding masculinity and femininity? Think of the messages you've absorbed since childhood, the constant pressure for men to be endlessly agreeable, to suppress any hint of toxic assertiveness, a term often conveniently applied to any masculine strength that is not easily controlled, to prioritize empathy and emotional vulnerability above all else, often at the expense of their own frame and inherent power. This isn't to say empathy is not valuable, but when it becomes a tool for unilateral emotional and psychological leverage, it has been weaponized. But the deception runs deeper. You've been taught to see female ambition for power and influence as inherently virtuous, empowerment, while similar, overt ambitions in men are often cast as oppressive or predatory. The will to power, in its feminine guise, is often cloaked in the language of equality, fairness, or emotional needs, making it difficult to discern, let alone counter, without appearing insensitive or unjust. This is the genius of its modern adaptation. It has co-opted the moral high ground. Why has this happened? Perhaps it is, as Nietzsche might suggest, a testament to the subtle, pervasive power of that which defines itself as good. By contrasting itself with a stronger other, it seeks to undermine. The taming of masculine power has been a long historical project, and its current iteration involves a psychological re-education where men are encouraged to voluntarily dismantle their own defenses, their own understanding of these power dynamics. In the name of progress or enlightenment, consider the narratives in popular culture, in media, even in academia. How often is strong, unapologetic masculine power portrayed positively, without caveat, without being ultimately subservient to or fixed by a feminine counterpart? How often are the more subtle, manipulative aspects of the feminine will to power critically examined with the same scrutiny? The disparity is not accidental, it is instructional. It conditions you to accept a certain imbalance, to view your own power through a lens of suspicion and guilt. You have been trained to play a game where the rules are unwritten, constantly shifting, and designed to place you at a disadvantage. If you adhere to the stated rules of fairness and directness, you are expected to navigate a minefield of unspoken expectations and tests, where your strength is often seen as a threat, and your conciliation as an invitation for further encroachment. This is the labyrinth you've been thrown into. But what if there was a way to see the walls, to understand the map, to reclaim your agency? The path to liberation begins with tearing down these illusions, one by one. The darkness has been illuminated, the deceptions unveiled. You now stand at a precipice, armed with a starker understanding of the currents that move beneath the surface of human interaction. It is a chilling vista, perhaps, but knowledge, even of the most brutal truths, is the first step towards authentic power. The solution, if we dare call it such, is not to rail against this fundamental nature, nor is it to adopt the manipulative tactics you now see so clearly. No, the path to liberation, the Nietzschean path, lies in the cultivation of your own will to power, in becoming a sovereign individual, unswayed by the subtle tempests of external validation or the veiled power plays of others. This is not about becoming callous or unfeeling. It is about becoming discerning. It is about understanding that the feminine will to power, in its eternal quest, will inevitably test your frame, your resolve, your very essence. The first step in forging your sovereign will is to recognize these tests not as personal affronts, but as natural phenomena, as the wind tests the might of an oak. Your reaction, or rather your conscious response, is where your power lies. To reclaim your agency, you must first reclaim your mind. You must deprogram yourself from the societal conditioning that has sought to neuter your strength and vilify your inherent drive. This means questioning every narrative that encourages you to diminish yourself, to apologize for your ambitions, or to seek external permission to be powerful. Nietzsche championed the Übermensch, the overman, not as a tyrant but as a self-mastered individual who creates his own values, who lives life as a work of art, affirming his existence with every action. This is your ideal. What does this look like in practice? It begins with an unwavering commitment to your own purpose, your own mission in life, independent of external validation or relational outcomes. When a man is deeply rooted in his purpose, his will to power finds a constructive, generative outlet. He becomes a force of nature in his own right, and this, paradoxically, is intensely compelling. His energy is no longer primarily directed at seeking approval or navigating the intricacies of romantic pursuit, but at actualizing his own potential. This cultivation of self involves radical self-honesty. Where have you been weak? Where have you abdicated your frame? Where have you allowed your emotional state to be dictated by external forces, particularly in your interactions with women? This is not an invitation to self-flagellation, but to clear-eyed assessment. Each instance is a lesson, an opportunity to reinforce your internal locus of control. The path is arduous. It requires constant vigilance and a commitment to becoming stronger, not in opposition to others, but in service to your own highest potential. The world doesn't need more compliant men. It needs men who are centers of gravity. In their own lives, the sovereign will is not built in isolation. It is expressed and tested in the crucible of interaction. Central to this expression is the concept of frame. Your frame is your reality, your perception of the world, and the implicit set of rules by which you operate within it. The man who has cultivated his will to power possesses an unshakable frame. It is not aggressive, nor is it brittle. It is calmly assertive, deeply rooted in his self-created values and his unwavering purpose. When confronted with the feminine will to power, which will inevitably seek to test or absorb his frame into her own, He does not become reactive or defensive. He simply is. This mastery of frame is not about control over others. It is about absolute self-control and congruence. It is understanding that in any interaction, there is a subtle negotiation of realities. The individual with the stronger, more congruent frame will unconsciously set the tone and direction. You must learn to hold your frame without apology, not through argument or force, but through unshakable inner conviction. This means understanding your own value, a value that is intrinsic and not dependent on external approval. What then is this value? It is the sum total of your competence, your resilience, your resources, both material and intangible, your character, and your ability to bring order and direction to chaos. Nietzsche emphasized the creation of values. For the modern man seeking to navigate these complex dynamics, this means actively building yourself into a man of substance. Are you developing skills? Are you pursuing excellence? Are you cultivating discipline and emotional fortitude? Are you, in essence, becoming a source of value rather than a seeker of it? The feminine will to power, as we have established, is instinctively drawn to and seeks to align with masculine power and value. Therefore, the most potent strategy is not a strategy at all in the manipulative sense, but rather a commitment to becoming a high-value man who operates from a position of internal strength and self-possession. When your cup is full, you do not seek validation from others to fill it. Instead, you interact with the world from a place of abundance. This also means understanding the unspoken language of power. Women are often masters of indirect communication, of testing boundaries and assessing strength through subtle cues and provocations. The man who is not attuned to this, who takes everything at face value, or who reacts emotionally to these tests, demonstrates a lack of awareness, a permeable frame. Learn to observe, to listen, not just to words, but to the underlying intent. Respond, do not react. Maintain your emotional equilibrium. This detached, almost amused understanding of the dance is a hallmark of a man who is truly in command of himself. Forget the scripts society has handed you about how you should behave, what you should want, or how you should feel. Instead, turn inward. Cultivate your own garden. Become so rooted in your own being, so committed to your own growth and purpose, that the external world, with its tests and its games of power, ceases to be a source of anxiety and instead becomes an arena for the expression of your strength. This is not about indifference to women, but a reordering of priorities where your relationship with yourself, your mission, and your own will to power takes precedence. From this foundation, all other interactions are recontextualized. The path we are discussing is not one of ease. The cultivation of your will to power, the mastery of your frame, the dedication to becoming a man of inherent value. These are endeavors that demand relentless effort and an acceptance of struggle. Nietzsche's philosophy is not for the faint of heart. It is a call to embrace difficulty, to see obstacles not as deterrents but as the very instruments by which strength is forged and character is revealed. You must understand that setbacks, rejections, and the constant testing by the feminine will to power are not deviations from the path. They are the path. This requires a profound shift in mindset. Where society teaches you to seek comfort and avoid pain, Nietzsche exhorts you to find meaning in the struggle itself. He introduced the concept of amor fati, the love of one's fate. This is not a passive resignation, but an active, affirmative embrace of all that life presents, the joyful and the sorrowful, the victories and the defeats. Why? Because every experience, especially the challenging ones, offers an opportunity for growth, for the augmentation of your power, for the refinement of your will. When you encounter resistance, when your frame is tested, when you perceive the subtle or overt power plays discussed earlier, do not succumb to bitterness or resentment. That is the reaction of the weak, of the slave morality that seeks to blame external forces for its own deficiencies. Instead, see these moments as invaluable feedback. What did this interaction reveal about your current level of self-mastery? Where was your frame weak? Where did your understanding of the dynamics falter? Each perceived failure is merely a data point guiding you towards greater strength and wisdom. This journey is one of eternal recurrence, not in a literal sense, but in the sense that these dynamics, these tests, will repeat themselves in various forms throughout your life. The goal is not to reach a mythical state where challenges cease, but to become the kind of man who meets these recurring challenges with ever-increasing competence, equanimity, and even a kind of joyful affirmation. This is the essence of Nietzschean self-overcoming. Therefore, your focus must shift from outcome dependence. Will she like me? Yuri, will I succeed in this venture? To process orientation. Am I living in accordance with my values? Am I striving to actualize my potential today? Am I meeting challenges with courage and integrity? When your actions are aligned with your deepest sense of purpose and your commitment to self-mastery, the external outcomes become secondary. You derive your satisfaction not from the fickle rewards of external validation, but from the knowledge that you are engaged in the noble work of forging yourself. This resilient mindset, this amor fati, is perhaps the ultimate expression of a powerful frame. It signals to the world, and more importantly to yourself, that you are not easily broken, that your spirit is indomitable. And it is this very quality, this unshakable inner peace and strength derived from embracing the totality of existence, that paradoxically makes you a figure of immense influence and attraction, not because you seek it, but because you are it. The final step is to integrate this understanding into a coherent way of life, a direct challenge to the man you are today to become the man you are capable of being. We stand now at the terminus of this difficult journey, having stared into an abyss of truths that society would prefer to keep shrouded. You have been shown the often unseen mechanisms of power, the veiled will that drives so much of human interaction, and the intricate dance between masculine and feminine energies, all high. Through the unflinching lens of Nietzschean thought, the illusions have been stripped away. The comforting narratives have been deconstructed. You can no longer plead ignorance, the problem, the supposed crisis of masculinity, the bewildering dynamics of attraction and power, the subtle ways in which women's obsession with power manifests, has been laid bare. Not as an indictment, but as an observation of nature's raw, often brutal, elegance. The will to power, in all its forms, simply is. To deny it, to moralize against its fundamental expression, is to argue with gravity itself. But more importantly, you have been offered a glimpse of the solution, the path to liberation. It is not a set of manipulative tricks or red pill tactics to win a game. Such approaches are merely reactions, still caught within the orbit of the very dynamics they seek to exploit. The true path, the Nietzschean imperative, is far more profound, far more demanding. It is the call to become who you are, to forge a sovereign will, to cultivate an unshakable frame rooted in self-created values and an unwavering purpose. It is the relentless pursuit of self-mastery, building yourself into a man of such intrinsic value and indomitable spirit that the power plays of others become irrelevant, or at best, amusing observations in the grand theater of life. This is not about hating or fearing the feminine will to power. It is about understanding it, respecting its force, and most crucially, ensuring that your own will to power is so thoroughly developed, so constructively channeled, that you meet the world from a position of strength, not supplication. It is about embodying amor fati, loving your fate, embracing every challenge as an opportunity to affirm your power and to grow. The grand deception of societal conditioning can no longer hold you captive if you choose to awaken. The silent indoctrination that sought to dilute your masculine essence can be overcome by a conscious decision to reclaim your mind and your inherent drive. So, here is the ultimate truth, the one that echoes beyond Nietzsche, beyond any philosopher, and resonates from the core of your own being. Your life is your creation. The power dynamics will always exist. The tests will always come. The feminine imperative to seek and align with power will continue, as it must. The question is not whether these forces exist, but how you will choose to meet them. Will you remain a pawn, buffeted by currents you don't understand, endlessly, seeking external validation, your frame weak, your spirit tethered to the approval of others? Or will you accept the challenge? Will you undertake the arduous, magnificent labor of self-creation? Will you dedicate yourself to becoming a man of purpose, of resilience, of unwavering internal locus of control? Will you become a sovereign individual, a creator of values, a master of your own destiny, who navigates the world with wisdom, strength, and a profound understanding of the human condition? The choice, as always, is yours. The path has been illuminated. The brutal truths have been spoken, not to break you, but to set you free. Now the only question that matters is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you turn away, back, to the comfortable shadows, or will you step forward into the demanding light of your own becoming? Do not seek to change the world or others first. Seek to master yourself. Understand these dynamics not to exploit, but to navigate with honor and strength. Build your value. Solidify your frame. Know your purpose. Embrace the struggle. This is the call. The echo from the abyss of truth is now within you. Become who you are. That is your ultimate power. That is the only answer that truly matters. Truly matters.